like to...
If it works.
So to start with, I would like to mention one of the, let's say, most important ideas or principles, as I understand course setting, as this mouse and cat game. And of course, in the course setter is the mouse and creating traps for these mice, the athletes. So it should be tasty, but it should be somehow challenging and tricky. And as I said, traps, that's maybe the one of the keywords. So, and to do it, every course setter should somehow know how do the athletes think, how do they feel during the race, and how do they navigate on the elite level, because navigation on the elite level, for example, is pretty different from what most of the hobby athletes are performing. Again, during this still introduction, I would like to mention also the fairness aspect, because orienteering is an outdoor sport, but the conditions are not sterile, and that belongs to orienteering, and we need to accept that. So we can never reach really the very same conditions for everyone, but that's perhaps natural. But it's always important what is the aim, and aim here is always to try to make it as fair as possible for all the athletes at the start. So some of the issues, just to name it, what we should carefully treat. So that might be the course leaking into public. And that's also like our role as a course setters, because somehow we need to keep that secret, and it's more and more challenging because you know how many people needs to, especially when the race is big, many people needs the courses and before the race. But we still need to have some system and limit it. And then these, like we all know, tramping the grass, nettles, bracken, blackberries. Quite often at my races, I really tried to tramp down the places around the controls or some important corridors, so that I would create the even conditions for everyone. Very important that the control is visible, that the flag is somehow visible, and not only when someone is punching it. Some organizers, they really love to hide the flags, but this is pretty unfair. Yeah, we try to avoid huge temperature differences, but that's a matter of the schedule of the race. And honestly, this is quite often seriously broken at high-level events nowadays. Yeah, when we have long loops on the course, which is sometimes the case, for example, at some, yeah, typically night competition, a longer one, and it's advantageous to do it in long loops, and then someone has the hills in the beginning and someone has the hills at the end, so that might be quite unfair. Then if you make the courses that someone gets or can get too much help from the athletes from other classes where the legs are common, then also we try to avoid that, of course. And one of typical mistakes is that the navigation start is visible somehow from the start or the pre-start area. so that you can see the runners that are running out into forest, which is of course also a little bit unfair. In connection to that, we wanted to mention also that we have some fair play codex in TOEFL. So there is this link, and yeah, maybe you know that. But as I could read it, it's focusing rather on how the athletes should behave during the race, before the race. But the course setting issues, they are not really mentioned there. But definitely worth reading. So let's go on. The first part of my presentation will be more focused on some race organization issues, but still I think they are pretty much connected with course setting, and they influence at the end the course quality. So I think it belongs here. So this first important statement that the course setter should not be disconnected from the overall race organization. I have an example here from when we organized World Championships 21. Then the organization team, they started to think roughly about long distance and relay arena, which was originally on this place more to south. And yeah, as we course setters, we have jumped into the organization a little bit later. And then when we tried to do some like pilot courses, then we realized that the place is simply not suitable at all because it was really far from nice, more interesting areas. And especially the relay courses for women would be very difficult to organize there. They would have a lot of waste running, uninteresting running. So then quite late, we have convinced the race director to move it to the other field, which was still really good as for the logistics, and it was much closer to nice areas, and it had really a very positive impact on the courses then. So this is, I think, good example of that if the course setters could have been involved from the very beginning, then maybe we would spare a lot of wasted job working with this original arena. So here I have some, let's say, chapters. What are the topics that we should solve before the race as a course setter? So I will now try to go quickly through it so that we have then at the end more time to devote really to this other question, how to make the courses more difficult. So I start with area and terrain choice. This looks obvious, but this basic question, if the terrain is really suitable for the particular race type, this should be really seriously handled. And I think in many cases, it's not solved in a good way, because there are some races, for example, some terrains which are suitable for long distance. They have many natural obstacles. They are physical, but they are not very good for middle distance because the terrain is not detailed and it's too physical. Or as I have this, for example, these examples here, you wouldn't maybe say that, but the upper upper picture is a sprint competition. That's a World Championships course from Japan. It looks like a long distance, but it was a good terrain for long distance, but it was totally unsuitable for a sprint. But still, it was organized there. And this other picture, that's a total opposite, a very, very extremely runnable terrain, which is unfortunately also not suitable for a World Cup sprint at all. And I think, if I'm right, this was in Dresden, Germany. But it was obviously too easy for a World Cup level, and even as a great course setter, you can't really do a challenging course there, unfortunately. So if the terrain is chosen like that, then a very important step, let's say, is spoiled. And even if you are a genius course setter, it will not be good. Then, of course, we are assessing if the terrain is available, if we are allowed to enter it, if there are some serious obstacles, if we can get contract, so that we can be really safe, that we can organize it there. And I have heard that in Austria there are also nowadays huge problems on that field, so you know what I'm talking about. Then, of course, the logistics, if it's accessible, but that's more questions for the race director, perhaps. Yeah, arena, parking, toilets. Sorry?
I think that was a mistake.
Okay,
active microphone.
Yeah. Okay, then we jump to the map chapter. So we should really make sure that the map is delivered good time before the race. Because especially my experience is that if I should do good courses that I'm really satisfied with, then I really need some time. I can't do it at once. I can't do it over the weekend. I start, I put some ideas down, and then I leave it, then I come back, then I see it from a different perspective, then I maybe remake it, and like that, or maybe few times. So it's really good to have it a good time before, not talking about that simply people don't want to be under pressure, the whole organization, and the map is one of the basic documents. And as I know, this is also quite a problem sometimes, also in Austria, because when I was communicating with organizers last year, then I think quite many times I've heard about that the map was made on a last-minute basis. So then I would nowadays really insist that the map is according to IOF mapping standards. Why? Because then there is a good chance that the map is readable, and that's one of the basic course setting goals that I have, that the course and the map is really readable while running and without magnifier, let's say, if possible. And the IOF standards, they really ensure it nowadays. Then it's a matter of fair play, of course, because we are not used to some local cartographer with his or her local map symbols. So it's nice if it's standardized. And then for the club, I guess it's much easier to maintain the file if it's according to standards to make the updates. Because if someone else is coming to do the update, then the approach should be, yeah, let's say more or less the same, hopefully. Then as a course setter, I also from the very beginning try to think about how we will print it. If I am limited by, for example, A4 format, then I already know which area should be mapped, where are the borders, and I also know where I am limited with courses. This is happening actually quite often, especially when I do trainings, that at first I try to somehow use the terrain, and suddenly at the end I realize, yeah, well, but I can't print it on my A4 printer. Then during the mapping works, if there is an opportunity, then it's super to take some part of the map that is ready, check it in the terrain, and also talk to the cartographers about some specific wishes, which means if I want to have rootstocks represented, significant trees, single tracks nowadays are a big problem, bracken and stuff like that. So, and it also, this is based on the purpose of the map, and also the season where, or the period where I will use it. So for example, this bracken, you know that it's at its highest, it can be June, July. So if I know that I will do the race in June, July, then definitely I want to have it represented. But if I do my race in March there, then I don't want to have this under vegetation represented on my map. So this is quite an important decision. And then I try to influence also the print quality of the map, because I understand it as a front product for our customers. That means the athletes. And this is embodied result of my course setter's work. So I really want to have it readable, and I really want the map to look well. So I always try to influence the race director and responsible persons to make it nice, and maybe invest a little bit more money and make a good impression. Course length. So when we plan the race, then this is, of course, extremely important. We need to know how long courses we should prepare. So we are using the calibration or estimation of course lengths using average kilometer of man elite, of winner of man elite. So there are several possible approaches. So the first is that I have some data from previous races in the same terrain. But then I need to take in account if, for example, the previous race was a long distance and now I'm making the middle distance, or the race was in autumn and now I will do it in the summer season where the under vegetation is high. But otherwise, generally, this works quite well, and it's a matter of calculating, and quite usually you can get to to really nice result and quite accurate courses. Then another method is pre-running, but pre-running is really risky, I would say. It's really difficult to get valid results from this method, because you need to get good people. These people need to be motivated. They need to do competition style effort. And not everybody is capable of that in training. And yeah, for example, I can say that how we did it at JVOC when we tested the long distance. Then I had really 2 guys available which were very suitable. They were first year or second year in elite class, so they were not much older than the best juniors, and they did it really seriously, and they ran it, I think, 1-2 minutes. It was a long distance, and the difference from the real times, then the real time of the winner was 1-2 minutes, so that was perfect. But also myself, when I was talking with them, we had a really good feeling from that testing, and they took it really seriously. They really focused on that, like if they were really racing. And on the other hand, for a sprint competition at the same JVOC, I had also very good people to test it, but somehow it was very difficult to create this real sprint atmosphere in this testing, in this training. And the result was, the time was very slow, and I could see directly because it was far behind my expectations. And they admitted that simply the effort was probably not so good, and that testing was good for nothing at the end. So, and then there is this famous story about how they tested the courses, for example, for World Championships 91 in Czech Republic. They didn't have any elite runners available because everyone wanted to try to be selected for these home championships. So then the older guys who were the course setters, they were running the courses themselves, but they were stopping at the controls, taking the times, trying to estimate how much they would be behind. And then out of that, they created these very, very far too long courses. And the winner time was 109 then. The second guy in the finish was 113. Because the course setters thought that they are too bad. Then the third possible approach is the analogy, that we are using data from races in similar terrains with similar morphology, similar vegetation, and that can also work pretty well. At sprint races, this is working super. You can really calculate it, and as exactly as for like 10-15 seconds. And also for the forest races, if you find a really suitable area, it's a really good method how to get this kilometer time. Generally, I would say if you are in doubt, then a shorter course is better than a longer course. This is an example of so-called Lenhardt table that we have in Czech Republic. I don't know if you have something like that in Austria, but it's already pretty old. Can be some 30-40 years, but still it's working. Up there we have the kilometer time, average kilometer time for the winner in men's elite. And on the rows you have the classes and the course lengths calculated based on that in these different types of terrains. And it really more or less is working even nowadays. Course flow and the start location. So now we are getting closer to something we call really a race concept. So here I would like to point out that to place the start is definitely not the first action of course setting process, but it's it's one of the like products of the course setting process, let's say. So we are asking ourselves the questions: how to handle the terrain, how to get the best out of it, how to satisfy all our customers, because usually we are not making the races only for elite, but also for kids, masters, beginners. But generally, when I start to think about the race, then if we talk, for example, about the long distance, I'm starting, of course, with trying to find some good longer legs. So the best long legs that I can create on the terrain. And on the other hand, if the task is to make the middle distance, then I try to find out how to approach the most interesting parts of that terrain, how to reach that highest possible technical challenge, which is the goal with the middle distance. Then we have some pilot courses or pieces of courses of some length and also of the character. So of course, when we do some pilot elite courses, we need to jump down and try to make some kids courses, starting more or less in the same area if it's possible. Also, we need to think about the master's courses, which can't be somehow physically brutal or with very, very reduced runnability. So we need to think about these older people as well. And then out of that, first, after all these considerations, there is some optimal place location that we think that it's really suitable for our race. And of course, all the time, the other organizers try to influence it, and they try to say, yeah, well, but here it would be so easy to come with the car to that place. We will need to bring everything in our hands, and it will take time, and blah, blah, blah. But as course setters, we need to resist this pressure, because we need to fight for the quality of our courses. And then when we have some idea about the start, it's good to directly think about the start place layout, because quite often we just mark the start with this start triangle on the map, but we forget a little bit about where to make the pre-start and about this visibility from the pre-start to the navigation start. And sometimes it forces us to move with that start a little bit. So it's good to do it at once. Then this is just very simple examples that, for example, when we start to think about the middle distance, then we try to find such nice detailed parts of terrains and use it with some loops or stuff like that. While, for example, when I do the long distance, then I try to find some natural obstacles in the terrain and address them with longer legs. So with this left example, it's the morphology. And this right example, it can be the vegetation, which is the obstacle. And yeah, I am saying that it looks quite obvious, but I have to say that also, even from my experience from the last year, consulting these courses, but when I consult the courses here in my club and everywhere, then still I can see that this is not so natural for many course setters, that they would start like that and that they would try to find really the legs which provide some route choice options. in a first hand. Because if you put the start first and then you try to find these legs, then the course flow simply not necessarily will be the optimal. And then also an important part, we know which courses or which classes we will have at the race. Then we know the kilometer times. Then we try to calculate the courses, and then we know how many, or we try to estimate how many athletes are expected in each class. So then we want to find out which classes we can join into same courses, because my aim as a course setter is to set not a special course for each class, but as few courses as possible, because then I can really focus on them. But unfortunately, at big Czech competitions, you usually set something between, I don't know, 40, 60 courses. It's crazy. And then based on especially classes where we have most entered athletes, we can see how long probably the start window will be. We are creating the table with first controls. So the start organization table. And then we also assess a little bit if the density is still doable, or if we will have too many people in 1 minute at the start, or too many people generally in the forest. So then we try to also influence the start intervals, or make the start window simply longer. Because if you do good courses and then it's totally crowded in the forest and people are running in huge packs, then it's not inspiring and funny anymore. Course system, extremely important from my point of view. Why? Because, as I mentioned, it's really impossible to make so many good courses if you would do every course unique. So you somehow are forced to get some kind of system into that. Otherwise, you would have 400 controls in the forest. And at the same time, also, we need to spread the crowd somehow and still deliver best available challenge and enjoyment to everyone, which means that if we want to do it, there is one option. You can do some courses that you focus on, like let's say elite courses. Then you have some controls in the forest, and then you somehow interconnect more or less randomly the rest of the courses. And this is happening very often. And of course, the outcome is that these other courses, they are simply not that good, or at least some parts of these courses make no sense at all. So if you want to avoid this, then you need to create some model of how the courses are leading through the area, some rough lines, and then these courses, these pilot courses, let's say, fork into your particular courses. But with this forking method, you can be quite sure that as many courses as possible for example, use the very nice long leg that you have found, because you will have 3 controls in the beginning and 3 controls at the end of that leg. And like that, you will get 9 options, and that's already quite a lot. And the better this model is, this concept of the race, then the easier is to derivate more and more courses, if needed, without compromising the quality, because they are still leading in this corridor that you have found that is the most suitable to have for that race. If you have a system, then it enables also an easier planning of refreshments, radios, TV, photo controls, preserved zones, and so on. So it's advantages. It also secures that the controls will be approached more or less from the same side, and there will be no these contra runnings. And as a side effect, it brings a relay style distribution and makes hanging more risky. Because if you just interconnect, if you would have just one control and one control at the end of this long leg, then everyone who is running it, then they are running to the same control. But if it's forked, then simply these people that are not so much self-standing, autonomous with their navigation, they will be punished even at individual races. So I was talking about it just verbally, so now just to show what I mean. This was a long time ago. This was Czech Championships 2000 that I was the course setter, and you can see this simple schema of the courses and how it looked in reality on the map. At the end of my thoughts, I have created this system of these loops because I realized that if there is something really interesting on this terrain, then it's this coming across the crown of the rocky slope into the stones from above. So then I always needed to get them up again, and there was a terrain change in this flat area and then back again into the slope. And so I provided this challenge for everyone, and you can see it was more or less the same corridor, but it was pretty forked and the courses were still very different for the classes. And it was quite easy to place the refreshments and the radios and so on. So now we got to the courses. So a good performance course, as I was thinking about it some years ago, I made some notes for myself. So a good performance course should be according to the discipline definition, should be variable, direction changes, leg length changes, morphology changes. Then the course exploits the terrain specifics. So I will choose obviously a different approach when I am in hilly terrain than I am on the flat area, trying to find some different kind of traps. But the course is also regardful. I really hate any redundant climbing or pure road running. I still think that we are orienteers and we are very inspired by navigation. Then the course should be fair, as we talked about it. A good course uses the reduced visibility where possible. But of course, only in places where it's well mapped and where it's not over the edge, let's say. It should not be a survival. It should be still orienteering. The course should be inspirative. So a basic rule is that as a course setter, I really feel like running it. And last, but also very important, it should be foolproof. So I want to test navigation skills, but I want to prevent the athletes of doing any other mistakes, like entering the forbidden zone that I have forgotten to mark it in the terrain if it was not very clear or stuff like that. So some unreadable course drawing, a very complicated one on the map that the people would be running to a different control, and so this I want to prevent. And if this is happening, then I really think that this is my mistake, not the athlete's mistake. So here, this was an outcome from some course setting seminar that we had in Czech Republic. And you can see two courses. One of them, the task was to make a middle distance style course. And one of them was, to my eyes, almost against all those principles that I was talking about. So I think you can guess which one is that. And the other one was much better. It tried to use really the best out of this very boring area, let's say, but unfortunately very typical in our continental space. So there you can really see some huge differences in approach in handling the terrain. So the better one is obviously the violet one, and the wrong one is the red one. So on the red one, for example, you can really see that there are almost no real direction changes. Some legs are very simple, very obvious. Then you even have this redundant climbing that you climb up to control number 7, then you run down to 8, then up to 9 again, then again down to 10 to have a tree in the middle of the shitty open area, and then you are approaching control number 11 from this side, so it's more or less a bingo control. While if you approach it from the other side as the violet course, then suddenly this control is doable, and you can have even a route choice, let's say. So these are the differences that we are talking about. So now we are getting closer to this basic question: how to make courses difficult, challenging. And I realized that this is very complicated to transfer this know-how, because this problem is not so well structured. So it's like if you ask yourself how to paint a good painting, because on these pictures you can see the same situation, and one picture was painted by some real painter and the other one was painted by one of my kids. And how would you explain to the kid what should be improved on his picture to make it somehow better? It's really complicated. But generally, good courses, they simply communicate well with the terrain. They're using its best features, and they are treating well its weaknesses also. They try to suppress the weaknesses of the terrain. But each task is a bit unique, So it's quite challenging to talk about it generally. And to my eyes, this course setting is a little bit piece of art. But what we can, for example, talk about is visibility. Because visibility is a critical quality in navigation process. Now we are talking about how the athletes are thinking when they are navigating. And navigation means that we know what we want to see and we somehow interconnect these visible objects. And so I have an example of different terrains here. So the terrain A is a typical continental terrain where we can expect quite good visibility. And thanks to that, also the morphology and vegetation is very visible. Terrain B is still good visibility, open forest, but as it's very broken, as the morphology is so detailed, then quite often we are hidden behind the horizon and suddenly the navigation is much more difficult. Then, on contrary, we have terrain C, where the morphology more or less doesn't exist. It's almost completely flat. But the visibility is very, very low. So again, it's more challenging because it's more difficult to interconnect these visible objects in this terrain. And then we have terrain D, where it's like a combination of B and C, because both the morphology creates many horizons where you are hidden behind it, and also the visibility is very low. So that's why this terrain in Clermont-Ferrand is so challenging, because it's like double challenging. But we are mostly doing our races in this A type of terrain, and what I just want to say with these examples is that our aim needs to be somehow to use the low visibility areas, or try to simply break the visibility for the athletes with horizons or stuff like that. So then I have another example. So the basic, if you want to make a more difficult course, the basic is to disable any line features following. That's obvious, because that's what we do for the kids, that they are at the beginning of their careers, they are following the lines, following the paths, ditches and stuff like that. And of course, if we deliver this to the elite athletes, they are not inspired. They are bored, and it's very easy for them. So this is the basic. Try to avoid it. And unfortunately, I have seen it for like quite much of it, I would say. Sometimes when I consult the courses that are supposed to be elite courses. Broken visibility we talked about. Low visibility. Similar situations, so that we try to create a parallel mistake option. Speed changes, direction changes. So if we talk about this course that we can see, here the course setter obviously worked with visibility in the beginning, because there was a good option with well mapped thicket. Then there is this breaking the horizon, running over the horizon where you don't have any like big features, it's really difficult to hit the control from above. You really need to be aware of the fact that you need to know up there where you are exactly. Then on the leg to number 5, you are trying to create this similar situation like a parallel mistake, or that you exchange simply one of these values for another because it looks also pretty the same. Yeah, well, I wanted to come to this slide because this one I consider to be one of the most important, because here I want to demonstrate how to work with every single leg on the course. So if I look at the picture number 1, I want to start from that place where the start is, and then I want to place the control somewhere in that area. So if I would place it on this rootstock, then the task for the athlete is just to run straight. There is no other option at all. And the control is visible because is on the visible side of the valley. So if I would make such a leg for an elite runner, then it would be really a basic stuff, easy, not challenging at all. If I make a really small move with the control at the picture number 2, if I put it into the reentrant, then suddenly the control is not visible when I approach it. Still, the task is obviously to run straight. There is still no other option, but it's very important that the athlete is somehow aware of the fact that the control will not be visible, or the object also. So you need to run exactly on the contour, and also you need to search, for example, this rootstock on the other side to indicate where you are. So there is some more thinking about it. Then if I, on the picture number 3, if I move the control a little bit, then I have already broken this, that it's obvious that you need to run straight, because suddenly there is something I wouldn't call a route choice, but rather a, let's say, track choice. That's not based really by any intention, but people are simply doing it somehow automatically. But I can guarantee that really almost every runner would choose a little bit a different track in the terrain when they have the opportunity to do it. So suddenly we have employed some more, let's say, experience at the side of the athlete. And also the control is, now it's in the light green. On the contour feature, not a super easy control, still you can miss it. So the leg is again a bit more difficult. But when I move it even more, as on picture number 4, then I have created a situation which is already a route choice situation. I would really call it a route choice situation, because you can really run it on the contour or to this upper path, or you can run it around on the road, but then you need to climb a bit. And the control from all directions is not super easy. You can miss it. You can make a mistake at control taking. So then I would be, as a course setter, I would be quite satisfied with this leg, because I have hired the level of demands. And this would be the elite leg to my eyes. Then another issue, it's a kind of paradox, because sometimes we think that if we put a lot of short legs into some detailed area, that then we have a challenging course. But I think it's the opposite. And here I have the example from World Championships 2 years ago in this beautiful area in Flims. Because somehow I was a little bit disappointed. I was expecting that it would be really challenging to use this most difficult area to put some longer legs there, because then the athletes, especially under this World Championships final pressure, when they are running such a long leg, they want to keep the speed. And sometimes the speed simply, it's too much. They lose the contact with the map, which is extremely important to somehow make them to lose the contact with the map, which is more likely to happen on these longer legs than on these short legs. Because when you run such a short leg, then you really more or less run from detail to detail. You don't dare to lose contact with the map when you are so close to the next control. And basically, this is the way that we are using. For example, when I'm with my kids group in some terrain where there is an area which is over their skills, then if you put very short legs into that area, then I can guarantee that even the kids, they will make it, because they will not lose contact with the map. While if you put a long leg for the kids, even in a, let's say, normal forest, then longer legs are much more challenging for them, because they have much bigger opportunity to lose contact with the map, and the relocation is always much more difficult than to know where you are if you really follow the map. So then once again, an example from one of the races in Czech Republic. It would be, of course, very tempting to put more controls into this area. But then I realized that it would be much more challenging for the athletes when they will be running this slope full speed, especially when it's at the start of the race, and still they need to keep the control. So then it's more likely that they will do a really big mistake. Then if I would, for example, put control on one of these stones and then there. Then this looks probably really as a stupid kids course, but if you don't have any other opportunity, for example, really making a course in a kind of really stereotype flat area where all parts of the forest are more or less the same, then you should really work with these changes that we talked about, direction changes and length changes. So if you make such a chain of controls suddenly, after some parts where people got used to some rhythm in that terrain, then for the less flexible athletes, this will be suddenly challenging, and maybe they will be not that prepared for that. And they might lose the flow. Then another trick that I like to use is when we focus here on especially on the leg towards the control number 6. I have found in a dictionary that it's called slantwise to run across the contours. So hopefully you understand what I mean. So it's not running on the contour, but with some grade of climbing or descent. I can guarantee that, for example, when the leg looks like this, then you will get as many roots from the athletes as you have a number of those athletes. Everyone will run its unique track on such a leg. So this is really good to do it like that. And of course, when we are running in a contour in a morphology which is rich for contours, then it's quite easy to run on the contour, simply to keep the contour, or just to run straight up or straight down. But as long as it is like this slantwise, then it's already much higher difficulty, let's say, to really work with these contours. So that's why, for example, I have made them here to run down, despite I was talking about that I really hate any redundant climbings, because it makes sense, because I don't want them to run on the contour and then again on the contour. I need to make it more difficult for them. Then I wanted to mention the balancing of legs. Here you have an example of some test races. I think this was the Czech team test race for Kiev 2007. And this is an area which is not interesting. It's not very suitable for a long distance. But if you really think about the legs, about every single leg, and if you know how the athletes are behaving, then still even in that kind of terrain you can reach this result, that you can see that out of these 6-7 athletes, in quite many occasions they were running different routes, even if it's quite flat like here. So it's a lot of thinking, and sometimes it's really worth, when you look into the map for a very long time, to have some opponent that will see it for the first time, and you will ask, yeah, okay, is this a route choice? How would you do it? Were you hesitating or not? Then nowadays I would really recommend to include a map flip. It can be, for example, only for the elite class, but it really enables you to re-enter the best part of the terrain. You don't need to create any map exchange plays, because nowadays really it's just to turn over the map, flip over the map, and they proceed. So you just print the map twice, and but I don't think that cost is, in overall income from the race, it will not be such a big sum of money for printing, and suddenly you will have a much more inspiring and challenging course. Like, for example, this was this middle distance course. It looks, of course, a little bit crazy because we had only quite a small area available for this middle distance at World Cup, but it was a really nice sandstone area. So, and some other parts down there, they were already not very well runnable. So I wanted to use this as much as possible. So then I have made this map flip, and I hope that the athletes, they really enjoyed it, compared to if they would be running somewhere down there in the thickets, crossing these boring valleys. I know we are already getting long, but we are coming to end. Still some few words about control places and control descriptions. Control places, also this approach, how to place the control, can influence the whole race. So myself, as I said, I choose rather a bit easier place if I am in doubts than a tricky control, because if you have one tricky control on the race, then it can spoil the whole race totally. Because people are running more or less the same performances, and then suddenly they are losing 3, 4, 5 minutes at one control in some thicket which is not well mapped and the flag is not visible. And as a course setter, you can be just very, very dissatisfied if something like that happens. And the flag should be well visible when you really arrived on the spot. When you are at the object of the control, you should see the flag with no problems, and it's really good if it's visible from more sides than just one. Then, of course, as a course setter, you check properly that the control codes of controls that are close to each other are different as possible. So I am really trying to have numbers like 41 and 56. I would never put a control which would be 33 and 37 close to each other, because it already starts with 30. And people are running fast and their brains are not working optimally. So this is typically a kind of mistake that I really try to avoid or prevent. Then this rule about that you should choose different objects when the controls are close to each other. Sometimes people solve it with they just name the control differently in control descriptions, if it's possible. For example, that something is a ditch and something is a depression, and it looks the same in the terrain. So my aim as a course setter is that I really prevent athletes of punching a wrong control. If they are searching for a depression, they should not punch the ditch because it looks like a depression. So I really choose a different object. And it's nice to have controls in the green like we have here on the picture, but the map there must be really perfect, and it should not be this kind of thicket where you only see 1-2 meters, of course. Then a few words about control description, because quite often we can see that people or course setters make a really, really complicated control descriptions, which are more or less describing the mess that you can see in the map. So how to solve it? I think the better way is to choose the control which is easy to understand from the map. Here we have an example, again, from this World Cup race. This was a boulder field. It was very distinct boulders, all of them. But if you would choose one of them which is inside the field, then it would be a big mess, and probably you could put something like middle stone there, but it would be already tricky. So the better way is simply to choose the one which is, for example, on the edge of this border field, and then it's very, very clear. Or even choose this depression. Originally, I wanted to choose the depression, but then somehow we had some discussions with TV because this was a TV control, and then we have put it on this stone. But still, it was very clear, I think, for the athletes. And they didn't need to look into control description too much. My experience is that when the control description is too complicated, then of course the athletes, they will not read it, especially these arrows indicating, for example, that it's northwestern border. I can't imagine to use it during the race myself. This is redundant information. And as a course setter, I need to solve it the way that such a control description is not needed, simply. But I know that as advisors, they really insist, they want to have it, they want to have all those pictures in the control descriptions, but I always try to convince them that the athletes, they will not read it. Refreshments. There are two ways how to fix it. One way is to put it at the control, and the other way is to put it somewhere on the road, like here on this left picture. But myself, I really prefer totally to put it at the control, because when I devote so much time to making good route choices, and I really want them almost at all legs, then you can see that if you do it like this on the road, then it's really determined. If you want to pass the refreshment, then simply you need to run there and nowhere else. And not mentioning also that the quality of such refreshments is much, much, much lower, because usually there is one person taking care about several refreshment stations. So it might happen that one of them is already out of water, or someone is simply crashing the table, and everything is wasted. So if you have it at the control, then it's under control. Of course, you offer one of the controls, but especially at the long distance, and the refreshments are more or less mostly at the long distance. At the long distance, the control is just the end of some interesting leg, so it doesn't matter if it's more visible. And yeah, these other pictures, they are here just to demonstrate that really in a hilly terrain, or even in a flat terrain, still the athletes, they are choosing totally different routes if they have the chance. So why to limit it with such a refreshments put somewhere on the road? Just because it's easier for me as an organizer to put it like that. Okay, coming to a summary. So my principles, if I think about it like that, they would be that I try to develop some traps. I try to have every single leg on the course with some meaning. I choose rather easier control than a tricky control. I want to create some variability and also surprise if it's possible. I definitely want to have a system, especially the more courses you have, the more you need some kind of system. I'm always trying to adapt the maps so that it's accurate, especially around the controls. a long distance should be something different than a long middle distance. Readability is critically important for orienteering in general. So it's better to have less information on the map than to have everything on the map but unreadable. And also I try to create a good balance in keeping the secrets against the athletes and transparency. That means that sometimes the organizers, they try to hide as much as possible, but then we are coming back to these types of mistakes that you want to avoid. So if something could be unclear, if, for example, the course drawing is too complicated, if there is something that could surprise the athletes, that it's not common and they could react in a wrong way and it's not connected with navigation, then it's better to describe it in race instructions, and it's better to say it, maybe also to tell it to speaker to talk about it. Yeah, this is it. And then this basic rule that I really, when you create the courses, even in a terrain that you generally don't like so much, you still should feel inspired. Even if it's not nice to run there, then still, if you create some kind of good challenges, then you feel inspired to do it, to run it, to test it. Yeah, looks that we came to the end. Hopefully you are not sleeping yet. So thank you for your attention. Wish you many successes and also joy with corseting, because corseting is really a joyful process. That's why we are doing it. And now, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer it.
Yes, thank you very much, Radek, for this really interesting presentation and personal point of views. Especially I like the end when you summarized everything. There's one question in the chat asking tips for using the same map for different days, events, or trainings. So I think the goal of the question is how you deal with the situation if you have to use a terrain for 2 days or something like this.
And you said for training.
Yeah, both. It's in one question. If you have using the same map for different days or different events, like if you keep one part of the map, or how you have, if you have tips for that.
This is very difficult to answer generally, because you know that, for example, nowadays this approach at the IOF level starts to be that you simply don't care about that the terrain was already used, which feels a little bit crazy. Now we are about to organize a Czech championships in night, and the day after we will have a middle distance, and we try to keep at least part of the terrain as this kind of like surprise that I was talking about. We can't keep the whole terrain, or we can divide it into 2 parts, but still I want to keep at least some part of the terrain as a surprise for the next day. Yeah, basically at WOC, we made the relay, and then there was a long distance last part of the course in the same area. And for example, there we have solved it, I think, quite elegantly, because for the relay, we used that part really detailed. People were really running a lot inside the sandstones, while at the long distance, they have passed the area with a route choice of like left or right route choice using the roads. So basically, it was a quite different type of orienteering, and they didn't use much knowledge from the relay competition for that. So I think that could be the approach, to at least in these areas where it's overlapping, to try to use a different style. Sometimes they cross more in the terrain, sometimes they can stick to the roads on a longer leg, but definitely this is a matter of like every situation, how to solve it, and I can't answer it generally, unfortunately.
Thank you. Another question is, I think that's pretty difficult also. How many controls do you use in an event? For example, 3 courses. So it depends probably on the type.
Three courses. That's the typical training course.
Long, sorry, or not sorry. It was now written law for long.
For a long distance.
Yeah, long distance training. Yeah, for a training, probably. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Generally, I don't use many controls at long distance courses. So I'm not the one that makes the long distance course on 40 controls, because I really try to find longer legs. Probably not the 3-4 kilometers legs. That's I already think that this is basically not very fair. I don't think you can really handle it as an athlete full speed. But longer legs of let's say 700 meters to 1.5 kilometer typically, it's really nice to have. So, but it depends a lot on the area. If you need to do it in a quite small area, then you need to make many turns, and that costs you some controls, of course. But generally at trainings, we stick to these maximum, something between 25 to 35 controls, even with more courses or forked courses. And if I make a big competition, then still I think I can be at, the limit is somewhere around 70 controls if I talk about a competition for 1,500 people, let's say. And I know that some other course setters, they would use maybe 100 controls for that race, or 110. It's really so easy to just place control by control. But it's very risky. The more controls you have, then the more risk you have.
Okay. Thanks. Then one question. There is a hand. Maybe you can speak.
Yes, thank you for your lecture. I have a question for the to the first controller. I think it's a very important controller. Do you give the runners the chance to come into the map, maybe not so an hard lag between to the first control, maybe some easier than other lags? Or do you think it's enough time from the start line to the start control for the runners to come into the map and come into the race, and you go maybe with a hard leg to the first control, and yeah, I think you know. Thanks.
Thank you. I understand the question. I don't think that, especially at some kind of like championships course, especially when you have a model event map or something like that, then I think it can be really full demands from the beginning, because on the other hand, this initial part of the course, how you handle it, it's really a masterpiece of navigation technique. So no regards. And to my eyes, it's a little bit different where it comes to route choice orienteering, because I try to avoid to have fundamental route choices that could create some really time differences. I try to avoid it, to have it in the beginning of the course, because I try to give the athletes the chance to get the feeling for the terrain on that day, and also to think about the legs. So if I really prepare a route choice where I can see many options, then I also want that the athletes have a chance to see them. But if I put them under pressure, then they will choose the option which is most obvious, and that's not the goal. And my experience when I observe the behavior of the athletes is really that this approach pays off, because if they have a chance to study it, they are very, very creative, especially on the elite level.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Are there more questions? In the meantime, I will ask you if you could give a short feedback. I will do a short survey coming to your Zoom. That's just how much you learned and how you like this lecture. So I started right now, but still you have the possibility to ask something if you want. Now everybody's working with the survey, sorry. So last option, last possibility for you. Otherwise, thank you very much for coming to this education lesson, and thanks Radek again for your time, for your preparation, and yeah, good luck for the next exercises for you. Is there any question left? Then now just raise your hand or talk to us. So Radek, you want to add something, or are you finished?
Yeah, I guess we are, everyone maybe sleepy and tired. I just want to add that talking about this small details in course setting, it's obviously maybe much better to have, for example, one course and go through it and really talk about all small details. So that can be a topic for some other time, let's say.
Okay, and don't hesitate to contact Radek if you have any questions, I guess, especially for the Austrian competitions. We try to include you too, especially for the championships. So that's an invitation for you. Thanks for your feedback, and yes, hope to see you soon. Good night, everybody. Many thank yous for you, Radek, in the chat. But you see it anyway, probably.
Thank you.
Danke. Gute Nacht.
Ciao.
Thanks. Ciao.
Hallo Leo. Ciao Leo. Hast du das noch Frage?
Servus, Leo.
Na, hab keine. Servus, Radek. Danke für alles. Gute Nacht.
You have seen the same pictures of kids like some
Yeah,
years
yeah,
ago in
sorry.
Fakamse, they are very popular now.
Yeah. What nice presentation. Again, I learned a lot.
Thank you.
In Alicante, I will ask you some things about training courses.
Yeah, yeah.
Because maybe it's a little bit different. Yeah.
Okay. Ja dann.
Gute Nacht. Danke. Servus.
Ciao. So I just delete everybody. Okay. I will stop the survey. Now you can see it like it's how much can you take from the today's lesson. Very much. You see it now?
Yeah.
Second is how much learned you and use did you learn, and last one, if you have or specific ideas how to improve the first settings. Yes, some, and no. So yes, thank you. Have you had some preparation beforehand, or did you do it all for now?
I picked some stuff from some presentations that I had. Yeah, but that was already quite many years ago.
Mm.
So that's why some of the pictures were quite, let's say, old. But
Yeah, but
that was never in English, so I had to.
yeah.
I did it. I did it more or less new stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you send me the presentation at some time?
Yeah, sure.
Or okay. Oh, we still have the recording, so I stop it now.